The first thing Lachlan Breck noticed was the cardigan. It was the third week of July in Miami, 91 degrees outside and climbing, and Leonie Ashwood had walked into Breck Global Properties wearing a heavy charcoal blazer buttoned to the collar over a long-sleeved blouse. The building's central air ran cold enough to raise goosebumps on most people. Lachlan kept it that way deliberately, the same way he kept his boardroom windowless, and his conference table built from black granite. Details mattered. Details told you everything if you knew how to read them. He watched her from the second-floor mezzanine as she crossed the marble atrium below, her leather tote clutched against her right side rather than hanging from her shoulder. Her left hand did all the work. She swiped her badge, waited for the elevator, and when the doors opened, she stepped inside and finally exhaled, a long, slow breath that only someone watching closely would have caught. Lachlan was always watching closely. Leonie Ashwood was 31 years old and the most quietly formidable person on his payroll. She was his director of financial analytics, which was the polite corporate title for the woman who kept the legitimate arm of Breck Global from hemorrhaging money, while simultaneously burying transactions that could not under any circumstances appear on a federal audit. She was heavy. Full hips, soft arms, a face that was round and pretty when she wasn't deliberately trying to make herself invisible, which was most of the time. She dressed in dark colors. She sat near the back of every room she wasn't running. She answered questions with precision and offered opinions only when asked. She was, in Lachlan's estimation, worth more to him than the 6 MBAs and 2 CPAs she had quietly outmaneuvered in her first 6 months on the job. He had noticed her 2 years ago at a financial compliance summit, standing alone near a window with a glass of water she wasn't drinking, listening to a panel discussion with the focused stillness of someone who had already clocked every mistake the speaker was making. He had hired her away from a regional firm the following Monday. He had never once regretted it. He watched her disappear onto the 14th floor, and then he picked up his phone. "Milo," he said when his head of security answered. "Pull the parking garage footage from last night. Main entrance and the sea-level elevator bank. Send it to my private terminal." He did not say why he didn't have to. By the time Leonie appeared at his office door at 9 sharp with the morning's offshore reconciliation reports, Lachlan was seated at his desk with both hands flat on the surface and an expression that gave away nothing. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was steady. She set the folder on his desk with her left hand. "Sit down, Leonie." She hesitated. "I have the Callaway Bridge accounts to cross-reference before the 11 o'clock. "Sit down." She sat. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at the middle distance just past his left shoulder, the way she always did when she was preparing to endure something. "Take off the blazer," Lachlan said. The color rose in her face immediately. "Excuse me. You're wearing long sleeves in July. You came in through the parking garage at 7:42 this morning instead of the main entrance, which adds 4 minutes to your commute, and which you have never done before. And you are holding your right arm against your body the way someone does when they have a bruised or cracked rib." He paused. "Take off the blazer, Leonie." "I'm cold," she said. "The air conditioning in this building is—" "Leonie." Her chin lifted. 2 spots of color burned on her cheeks, and for a moment she looked like she was going to push back. Then she reached up with her left hand, worked the button slowly, and slipped the blazer from her shoulders. The bruise started at her wrist and disappeared beneath her sleeve. Even from across the desk, Lachlan could see the color of it, the deep wine purple of something that had been struck hard, not fallen against. He stood. He came around the desk. He crouched in front of her chair and gently pushed the fabric of her sleeve up to her elbow. The bruise wrapped around her forearm like a handprint. Because it was a handprint. Lachlan stared at it for a long moment. When he looked up, his face was very still. Who did this? Not a question. "I tripped in the parking garage last night," Leonie said. The words came out practiced and flat, the way words do when they've been said out loud 100 times to a bathroom mirror. The wet floor by the south entrance. I caught myself on the concrete ledge. I'm fine. It looks worse than it. That is a grip bruise, Lackland said quietly. The spread of the fingers is visible. Someone grabbed your arm hard enough to leave hemorrhaging in the subcutaneous tissue, which means it was sustained pressure, not impact. He held her gaze. Who put their hand on you? Leonie looked at him for a long moment and said nothing. Her jaw worked. Her eyes went bright and she blinked twice, fast, the way a person does when they are absolutely refusing to cry in front of their employer. It's nothing, she said finally. It won't affect my work. I have the Callaway accounts. I don't care about the Callaway accounts right now. She blinked again, startled. In 2 years she had never heard him say those words. Lackland stood. He pulled his cuffs straight and walked back to his desk. Go back to your office. Tell Renata to push my 11 o'clock. And tell Soren I want the full background package on the man you live with on my desk before noon. Leonie went very still. How do you know I know everything about the people who work for me. His voice was even. Go. She went. She walked carefully, the way people do when they are trying hard, not to limp, not to favor, not to give anything else away. The door clicked shut behind her. Lackland sat in the silence of his office for 60 seconds. Then he opened his desk drawer and took out a phone he used only for certain kinds of business. He made one call. By noon, he knew everything about Wyatt Greer. Wyatt was 35, a mid-level project manager at a commercial construction firm who had been on thin ice with his supervisors for the past year. He had a losing streak at the Seminole Hard Rock that had turned into a bleeding, metastasizing addiction over the last 18 months. He had drained the joint savings account he shared with Leonie of $11,000. The neighbors in their Brickell Avenue apartment building had called the building manager twice about raised voices. The most recent incident, according to a doorman Soren had spoken to by 2 o'clock, had occurred the previous night. Lackland read the file once. He closed it. He looked out at the Miami skyline and the distant, flat glitter of Biscayne Bay, and he thought about the way Leonie had held her arm against her body crossing the marble atrium. He buzzed Renata. Tell Leonie to come in at 6, and order dinner from Stubborn Seed. He paused. Tell them it's for me, they'll know what to send. Leonie arrived at 6 to find Lackland's private conference table set with food she had never seen ordered in the office before. Stone crab, which was absurdly out of season, and therefore absurdly expensive. A risotto with black truffle, thick wedges of toasted sourdough, a shallow bowl of burrata with heirloom tomatoes the color of garnets. She stood in the doorway and stared. Sit, Lackland said, already in the chair at the head of the table, jacket off, his sleeves rolled to the forearm. He looked human like this, which was unusual. He almost always looked like a piece of architecture. I should get home, Leonie said. Wyatt is not your concern tonight. Something in the way he said it made her go quiet. She looked at him for a moment, and then she sat down across from him and let him plate her food without arguing. She ate slowly at first, the way someone does when they have spent too long being watched while they eat. Lackland noticed. He said nothing about it. He poured her sparkling water and talked about the Callaway accounts, deliberately, because it was something she was good at, and because he had learned 2 years ago that Leonie Ashwood relaxed when she was talking about numbers. The tension in her shoulders dropped by degrees as she walked him through the discrepancy she had flagged in the third quarter projections, a $340,000 float that no one else on the team had caught. You found that in a dataset of how many line items? Lackland asked. About 4,000. In how long? She looked almost embarrassed. 40 minutes. He looked at her steadily. You are aware that I have a forensic accounting firm on retainer who charged me $28,000 for a similar audit last February. I know, I read their report. They missed 2 additional discrepancies. He almost smiled. "I know, I had you review it afterward." She reached across the table for the burrata, and her sleeve shifted. The bruise was there, vivid and ugly against the pale skin of her inner arm. She saw him look at it, and she pulled her sleeve down. "He didn't used to be like this," she said. Her voice had gone quiet. She wasn't looking at him. Wyatt, he was. For the first year, he was fine. Mostly. She paused. The gambling got worse last winter. When the money started disappearing, he started looking for things to be angry about. "And you. And me." She looked down at the table. "He says I embarrass him at his work functions because of how I look. He says if I weren't." She stopped. The words caught. "Leonie." She looked up. Lachlan held her gaze. There was nothing soft about him, nothing that could be mistaken for pity. "You manage the financial architecture of a company with $2.3 billion in annual revenue. You are the most precise analytical mind I have encountered in 20 years of doing business, and the man who is supposed to love you has convinced you that you are the problem. He says I take up too much. He's a gambling addict who has stolen money from you and is putting his hands on you," Lachlan said, flat, factual. The same voice he used to close a deal. "Those are the facts. Everything else he has told you is noise." The silence stretched. Somewhere in the building, an elevator dinged. Outside, the Miami skyline had ignited with the last of the sunset, orange burning into violet, burning into the deep indigo of an approaching storm. Leonie set down her fork. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. She was not going to cry. She was extremely not going to cry. "I'm sending you to the Brickell edition tonight," Lachlan said. "There's a suite reserved under the company name. Soren will drive you to the apartment to pack a bag. He will be with you the entire time. Wyatt won't be there." She looked at him. "How do you know that?" The question sat between them. Lachlan picked up his water glass. "Go pack your bag, Leonie." 40 minutes later, she stood in the doorway of the apartment she had shared with Wyatt Greer for 17 months and realized immediately that something was wrong. Or rather, something was right in a way she couldn't explain. The apartment was empty. Not just empty of Wyatt, empty in a particular way, the way rooms feel when the air has recently changed. His jacket was not on the hook by the door. The PlayStation was on. A sports game paused at halftime, but the controller had fallen to the floor. A half-eaten bowl of chips sat on the coffee table. Everything else was undisturbed. Leonie stood in the middle of the living room with Soren, a quiet, broad-shouldered man with a calm that suggested violence was not new to him, waiting in the hallway. She looked at the paused screen. She looked at the chips. She thought about Wyatt's hand on her arm the night before, the way he had grabbed her when she tried to walk away from him, and she picked up her overnight bag and walked to the bedroom to pack without thinking about it further. Across the city, in a parking structure beneath a waterfront hotel in Edgewater, Wyatt Greer was having the worst and last conversation of his life in Florida. He had been in the elevator when the doors opened on a subterranean level he had not pressed. 2 men in dark clothing had stepped in. He had tried to press the lobby button. His hand had been calmly removed from the panel. He was now standing against a concrete pillar in the fluorescent half-dark, and Lachlan Breck was walking toward him across the oil-stained floor. Lachlan had loosened his tie. That was all. He looked, if anything, slightly bored. "I'm going to be brief," Lachlan said, stopping 6 feet away. He clasped his hands behind his back. "I don't enjoy explaining myself, so I'll ask you to listen carefully the first time." "You can't," Wyatt's voice cracked. "You can't just, I know people. My cousin works for the county. Wyatt." Lachlan looked at him the way a man looks at a cup of bad coffee. "The Greek nationals you owe $27,000 to in Little Havana have your cell number and your home address. I know this because I have both pieces of information and I obtained them in under 3 hours. I also know about the additional debt at Seminole. I know about the joint account, and I know about last Tuesday and last night." A pause. You have put your hands on the most valuable employee I have. That is a business problem, and I solve business problems." Wyatt's mouth worked. "She's my girlfriend, whatever she told you." "She told me nothing. She lied for you, actually, which tells me everything I need to know about what you've done to her." Lachlan nodded once. One of the men behind Wyatt set a black duffel bag on the concrete floor. "That bag contains $150,000 in cash. You will use it to clear your debt with the Greeks, and whatever remains goes toward removing yourself from the state of Florida. You have 72 hours. Wyatt stared at the bag. "And if I don't?" "Then the Greeks receive your location by morning, and if they don't finish the conversation, I will have it finished elsewhere." Lachlan tilted his head, almost thoughtful. "Before that happens, I'll make sure you understand what it feels like to be grabbed by someone larger than you and have no way out of the room." The silence had teeth. Lachlan took a phone from his inside pocket and set it on the lid of the bag. "You'll send her a message. I'll tell you what to write. You'll pack tonight, and you'll never be in this state again." Wyatt's hands were shaking when he picked up the phone. He typed what he was told to type, and he hit send without reading it back. 40 minutes later, in a marble-floored suite on the 22nd floor of the Brickell Edition, Leonie Ashwood was sitting on the edge of a king-sized bed in a hotel bathrobe when her phone buzzed. Wyatt's name on the screen. "I'm done. Found someone better. Don't try to contact me. This is over." She read it. She read it again. She set the phone face down on the duvet and sat with her hands in her lap and waited for the collapse, the heaving, suffocating grief she had always assumed would come when this ended. Because Wyatt had told her for 2 years that no one else would want her, and she had been afraid enough and worn down enough to half believe it. The collapse didn't come. What came instead was a kind of lightness, cellular and total, like a coat she had been wearing so long she'd forgotten the weight of it had finally slipped from her shoulders. She pressed her hand to her mouth. She laughed, a single disbelieving sound, and then she started to cry, not from grief but from the sheer dizzying relief of being free. There was a knock at the suite door. Lachlan stood in the hallway with no jacket and a bottle of Pellegrino, looking like a man who had come from a meeting rather than from wherever he had actually been. He took one look at her face and stepped inside without being invited. "He texted me," she said. "I know." She looked up at him. "He said he found someone better." He lied. "I know," she exhaled. "I know he did. I'm not crying because of him. I'm crying because I can breathe." She pressed the heels of her hands to her eyes. "I'm crying because I can breathe, and I had no idea I'd stopped." Lachlan set the Pellegrino on the nightstand. He sat in the armchair across from her and said nothing for a while, which was its own kind of kindness. "I let him do it," she said finally. "I knew what was happening. I have a master's degree. I have read every study on coercive control ever published. I knew." She shook her head. "And I still believed him when he said I should be grateful. People who have been systematically told they are less than they are don't leave because they understand what's happening to them," Lachlan said. "They leave when they finally find something, or someone, that makes them remember what they were before." He looked at her directly. "You were never less than, not for a single day of your life." She didn't say anything. She just looked at him, and something in her chest cracked open and rearranged itself. 6 months passed. Miami turned from the brutal white heat of late summer into the golden, open-windowed weather of December, and Leonie Ashwood changed so gradually that it took the rest of the office 3 months to fully register what they were seeing. She had taken the promotion Lachlan offered, Chief Financial Strategist, a title that came with a corner office, a salary increase that made her blink twice at the offer letter, and a seat at every executive table. She stopped sitting at the back of rooms. She stopped making herself quieter. She had spent 3 Saturdays at a boutique on Miracle Mile with a stylist who specialized in plus-size clients and who had, over the course of those 3 Saturdays, convinced Leonie that emerald green was her color and that structured blazers could be made to celebrate a body rather than contain it. She had not lost a pound. She had stopped wanting to. She still worked late. She still brought Lachlan his morning reports at exactly 9. But the dynamic between them had shifted into something neither of them had named. Something that lived in the way their shoulders were always slightly too close when they stood over the same set of projections, in the way he watched the door after she left a room. She was walking back to the office on a Tuesday in December, a real estate portfolio under her arm, cutting through the narrow lane beside the Breck, building the way she always did in the afternoons, when a figure stepped out of the shadow of the service entrance. "Well," Wyatt Greer's voice was a raw, unsteady thing. "Look at you." Leonie stopped. She looked at him with the same expression she used for balance sheets that didn't add up. Neutral, precise, already calculating. He looked terrible. He had lost weight in the wrong way, the kind that came from stress and bad decisions rather than discipline. His eyes were overbright and moving too fast. The $150,000 was obviously gone. She could see it in his shoes, in the collar of his jacket, in the faint tremor in his hands. "Wyatt," she said evenly, "you need to leave." "I did some research," he said, stepping closer. "Your boss, the Breck family, the offshore shipping, the port contracts." He said it like he was holding a match. "You're in the middle of something federal agents would love to hear about. And I've got names, dates, account numbers." He stopped 3 feet from her. $1 million wired to an account I'll give you, or I walk into the FBI field office on Biscayne tomorrow morning. Leonie looked at him. The man who had grabbed her arm in a dark hallway and called her a burden to her face. The man who had told her she should be grateful, that someone her size should be grateful, that she was lucky to have him. She felt nothing but a clean, clarifying contempt. "Wyatt," she said, and her voice did not shake at all. "You just threatened a federal extortion charge to the wrong person in the wrong parking lane." "You fat." The metal door to the service entrance burst open. Lachlan walked out into the December sunlight with 2 men behind him, and the particular expression of someone who has run out of patience entirely. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Leo," he said. It was the first time he had ever called her that. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she said. She turned back to Wyatt, who had gone the color of old chalk. "I wanted a moment first." Lachlan stopped beside her and waited. Leonie looked at Wyatt Greer, really looked at him, for what she understood was the last time. "You told me I took up too much space," she said. Her voice was perfectly level. "You said I was lucky, you said I should be grateful, and smaller, and quieter, and less." She tilted her head. "But here's the thing, Wyatt. I was never the problem in that apartment. I was just too much woman for someone who needed me small to feel large." She turned to Lachlan. "I have a board presentation in 40 minutes. "I know," Lachlan said. "I'll handle this." He nodded once to the men behind him. Wyatt started to speak, started to threaten, started to bargain, all at once, and none of it in sentences. It didn't matter. The 2 men moved with the unhurried efficiency of people who have done this before, and Wyatt Greer was guided toward a waiting car with no markings, and the door closed, and the car pulled out of the lane and into the afternoon traffic, and that was the last time anyone in Miami would see him. Lachlan followed Leonie inside. She was already moving toward the private elevator, the portfolio under her arm, her heels steady on the marble. He caught the elevator just before the doors closed. They rose in silence for 2 floors, and then Lachlan reached past her and pressed the emergency stop. The elevator halted between floors with a soft lurch. Leonie turned to face him. There was nothing corporate about the way he looked at her now. No calculation, no strategy, nothing held back or weighed or rationed. "I have a board presentation," she said. "You have 40 minutes, he said. "I only need 2. He crossed the small space between them. His hands came up to her face, careful, unhurried, The way he touched things he considered valuable, and he looked at her for one long, honest moment before he brought his mouth down to hers. The kiss was not gentle. It was the kind of kiss that comes from 2 years of proximity and restraint and mutual, careful pretending, and when it finally broke, Leonie had both hands knotted in the front of his shirt and was not entirely sure which one of them had moved first. He pressed his forehead to hers. His thumbs traced the curve of her cheekbones. "I am not a man who does things simply," he said, his voice lower than usual, "so understand that this is not simple for me. You are the most remarkable person I have ever hired, and one of the most remarkable people I have ever met, and I have been watching you remember who you are for 6 months, and I am done pretending I don't have an opinion about it." She laughed, breathless. "An opinion? I want you beside me in the building and outside of it, permanently." He pulled back just enough to look at her properly. "Say yes." Leonie Ashwood, who had once hidden in dark colors and taken up as little space as possible, and told herself she was lucky. Leonie looked at the man in front of her and thought about the morning she had walked into this building, with her arm held carefully against her side, and her heart braced for another year of the same. She thought about the weight of a coat you forget you're wearing. She thought about what it felt like when it finally came off. "Yes," she said, and pulled him back down.